Hey everybody, Matter here. I am back from my little vacation away from YouTube, back and ready to continue on again. So, the last episode was finishing up Yua's ending, and now we are going to be starting Ayase's ending. Similar to Yua, Ayase is kind of like pretty mysterious character. We don't know too much about her. I think she's probably one of the more mysterious ones. Uh, it feels like a lot of the minor characters are like, now that I'm thinking like Senna, Kozue, we know a little bit about them and their backstory, but not too much. So we're kind of like getting a little bit more into their character, and she feels like she could be a very interesting one, especially that the title of her playthrough, her ending, a bloody contract for your sins. So I feel like this is going to be a little bit more of a violent one. We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, let's just get right into it and let's play through Ayase's ending. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. We might be able to finish it in one episode. It might be a two-parter like with Yua's. But yeah, let's get into it and let's find out. All right, here we go. We've got a new selection of questions. Fest must be asking me for salvation. Yes? It's worded slightly different in my walkthrough, but hopefully that's the correct one. I want to give in to Fess's seduction. No, I almost picked yes. No. I'm sure jumping off would feel amazing. Yes. I don't care if I die, as long as it's together with Fess. Yes. I want to be set free from everything. Yes. Alright, Pound and the Stake discovered Ayase's story. I couldn't give any response, I had no idea what to do. Bess said nothing back to me either. She just spread her arms out wide, taking on a pose as if she'd been crucified. Suddenly the rain and the wind stopped. I tried to say something, but I couldn't make a sound. Nothing would come out of my mouth. Fess's body slowly tilted backward. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. I tried to reach out towards Fess, but my own movements were in slow motion too, so I could only look on in frustration as my arm slowly extended out in front of me. Fess was already closing her eyes, and not long after, her figure disappeared from my line of sight. I'd been getting lost in my own delusions as usual, but it had all gone south pretty quickly. Well, that just goes to show how strong the aura Fez gave off truly was. She sort of had a sense of ruinous beauty to her. That said, I didn't have the slightest fucking clue what ruinous beauty was supposed to mean, though. Lol. Okay, saws, laughing my ass off. In the end, I got sick from the size of the crowd at the concert, so I had to rush to leave the venue. As a result, I'd barely watched any of the performance at all. And honestly, I never wanted to go ever again. Well then, I guess I'll log on to ESO or something. That ought to rid me of this depression. I'd shown up at school on Thursday for one reason and one reason only, to meet up with Misumi-kun so we could go see Ayase in the hospital. Granted, he had more or less forced me to tag along, but I still figured that maybe Ayase could help me out. With Rimi seemingly out of the picture, I needed someone else to protect me, and Ayase was one of the candidates I had in mind. So maybe, just maybe, if she had already recovered somewhat, she might have been able to do something to that effect. And on top of that, with her help, my chances of obtaining a real D-sword would skyrocket. I really couldn't do it on my own. Then again, it was Ayase herself who had said, obtaining a D-sword isn't something one can teach. But still, this was Ayase we were talking about. Surely she could help somehow. Coming in through the front entrance, Misumi-kun looked around the lobby in confusion. What's wrong? I called out to him.
いや、 岸本の病室ってどこなんだろうなって思ってよ。
Did he seriously come this far without knowing that? This guy was beyond belief sometimes.
ここは外来棟だよ。病棟は隣。
そうなのか。
AH Tokyo General Hospital. It was the hospital I'd gone to ever since I was a kid. I'd even come here just the other day, so I was pretty knowledgeable on where everything was. Dr. Takashina's face flashed across my mind, and I involuntarily groaned to myself. As we walked to the hospital ward, Misumi-kun turned to me.
で、病棟の何号室だと思う？
そんなのわかんないよ。
This was a general hospital, so there were obviously a ton of different wards and departments. If I had to guess,
多分外科じゃないかな。でももしかすると精神科かも。
there hadn't been any visible injuries onto Ayase after she'd fallen, and considering she'd attempted suicide, her mind had likely been brought to the brink, so her being in the psychiatric ward seemed very possible. Even I'd been taken to the psych ward after the uproar at O-Front.
タクって物知りだな。
Thinking that wandering around the ward would cause problems for the patients, we decided to ask for help at the nurse's station. And just like I'd predicted, they told us she was on the floor for psychiatric patients.
なあ、この前話したよな。女を落とすのに一番簡単な方法。
Misumi-kun grinned from ear to ear as the two of us walked down the hall. Was that seriously your only reason for visiting her in the hospital? At least have the common sense to not talk about it aloud. Regardless, I think he'd said the fastest way was act like you care in her moment of weakness or something like that.
俺は今日こそあの難攻不落の岸本を落としてみせるぜ。
Misumi-kun shone a pearly white smile and gave me a thumbs up. It didn't matter how confidently he said them, the words coming out of his mouth were totally disgusting. But I guess he could get away with it because of his good looks. It must have been nice being an alpha male.
でだ。お前って岸本と仲いいだろ？
別に。
しらばっくれるなよ。というわけでフォロー頼むぜ。岸本にいかに三角大輔って人間が素晴らしいかを語ってくれ。
無理だよ。
無理とか言うなって。マジ頼むからさ。
Have a little restraint, will you? You're at a hospital, not a mixer. With him acting like this, was it even a good idea to have him see Ayase at all? It wasn't like she really cared much about him anyway. The pit in my stomach was getting deeper and deeper by the second.
お、タク。病室はここじゃねえか？
Misumi-kun stopped in front of a door and pointed at the nameplate. It definitely did say Kishimoto Ayase. The door was closed, so we couldn't actually see who was inside.
いいか？うまく俺に話を合わせろよ。
うん。
For the time being, I nodded in agreement. Although, even if I did get the chance to say something to Ayase, I doubted I'd be able to say much, regardless of whether Misumi-kun was there or not.
おーす、岸本さん。
Misumi-kun opened the door, greeting Ayase with a cheerful tone.
お見舞いに来た。
But that tone didn't last very long. His face immediately froze. Wondering what made him stop, I decided to peek over his shoulder. Oh, it looks different from before. The sword? It was not that big. Wait. That's... Oh shit, that's Rin's, right? So we've got 3 of them there. And that one next to it is... that is Nanami's. So wait, is she collecting the swords? Did she, like, go to each of the girls and take their swords from them by force? The room was around 10 square meters in size. Past the entrance, there was a bathroom to the right and a bed in the back. And on the bed... Whoa, okay, well, this is certainly different. So we've got her stained in blood. What's his name? Suwa came by to see her. Maybe she killed him. Maybe that's the blood of the other 2 girls whose swords that she has for some reason. Sat Ayase stained with blood from head to toe. Her hollow eyes pierce straight through us. Well, color me intrigued. This is definitely interesting. And this isn't a delusion, because Misumi can see it. Misumi-kun let out a pathetic scream, then shoved me aside and flew out of the room. I wanted to run as well, but my legs were frozen in place. I quivered in fear. And yet, at the same time, I was struck by the bewitching beauty of the blood-drenched girl, as well as the things leaning against the wall behind her. I couldn't move an inch from where I stood. Yeah, he doesn't know who those belong to, right? The objects resting there, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, were D-swords. 3 of them, to be precise, including the one I'd seen her wielding before. Each one had a different shape. One had a form so strangely sophisticated it could barely pass for a sword. Another was shaped like a cross, its form evoking a sense of heart-rending pity. And the last one, which Ayase had used before, appeared mystical yet aerodynamic. Why did Ayase have 3 D-swords? Wait, why had I assumed a person could only have one? Maybe Seta and Kozupi had multiple swords too.
Takumi.
And she's like, hey, pick one. You want a D-sword? Take a D-sword. She called my name and I gulped. She began to approach me, her body surrounded by an air of elegance. I was frozen in place.
来てくれたのね。
どうしてそんなに
I know, I don't think you can use someone else's D-sword. Maybe she's like, they're traitors. They will, what does she call herself? Like a soldier? She says, I'm a soldier or something. And she's like, they don't deserve the sword, so I took them from them by force. Her pajamas were dyed crimson by an abundance of blood. Blood that hadn't even dried yet. The rusty smell of fresh blood seeped into my nose.
黒騎士の血よ、これは。
The Black Knights, that's what they're called.
黒騎士って綾瀬本人の
いいえ、
じゃあ誰綾瀬はその人を殺したの
Ayase smiled, a wide smile, and then she giggled.
怯えているのね、匠。
I mean, this is called a bloody contract for your sins. There certainly is blood. She stroked my cheek with her blood-soaked fingers.
でも、君を怯えさせているのは、君自身の心の内にあるものよ。不浄なる邪心に打ち勝って、純粋な邪心のみを心に留めるのよ。そうすれば、理想度は手に入る。手に入れてもらわなくちゃいけない。君は黒騎士なのよ。君には力があるわ。
Oh, she says, right? She says they're the blood of Black Knights. Does she assume all D-sword owners are Black Knights?
理想度を手に入れたら僕も殺すの黒騎士を殺してきたんだろ
惑わされないで。それが不浄なる邪心よ。
Ayase peered at my face, her hand still on my cheek. Her eyes looked hollow, and yet I could sense a profound radiance buried deep within them. Because didn't Rimi, she went to Ayase to be like, you need to leave Takumi alone. So if Ayase is hell-bent on getting Takumi to, like, unlock his D-sword, she could see Rimi as a threat and maybe killed her. I couldn't take my eyes off of her.
黒騎士は本来なら邪心を制御できるわ。けれど邪心王は巧妙だった。グラジオール記黙示録詩編第6巻2章50節。グラジオールは邪心を少しずつ侵食することで静かに支配を完了し、邪心の暴走を引き起こすのよ。負けてはいけないわ。邪神王の精神侵略に。
I had never made eye contact with a 3D girl for this long before. I was completely captivated by the traces of sorrow, desolation, and vigor in her eyes. I hadn't listened to a single word she'd said.
守って
When I snapped out of the trance, I found myself muttering that.
僕を守ってくれ
いいわ。
Ayase nodded without a second thought, and then she brought her face closer to mine. Stench of blood grew stronger, becoming more and more overwhelming.
これは 予定されていたこと。
She whispered softly in my ear. My heart was racing.
君を守るわ。君も私を守って。
With her body smeared in blood, she was so corrupt, so impure, and yet so bewitching at the same time. It was hard to believe that a girl like her was a student at my school, and in the same year as me, no less.
他の黒騎士はもう当てにはできない。
Oh shit.
最初は予言通りに黒騎士を集めようと思ったけれど、私の力では無理だった。
So it's like all the people that I normally would ask for help, she's already taken care of them so that I have to ask her for help.
でも、匠がいてくれるなら。
At least I assume that's what she means. Just like she had at the concert, Ayase showed me a face that was unbearably seductive, a face she rarely ever showed.
いずれ完全に開くわ。呼吸とその門は。その時、邪神王はこの世に降臨する。だから、急いで集めるのよ。7本のディソードを。
Oh shit, okay. So we're gonna just go around and like kill so this is like the bloody contract for my sins. So like I'm going to be corrupted by her to go around and kill the other D-sword users. Cool, 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 cool.
私と君。
I love this though. This means that I probably won't be stuck in my, you know, in my little room like I have been for the past 2 episodes, the past 2 endings. We're gonna have some action here. There were 3 D-swords leaning against the wall. In other words, there were 4 left.
うち1本は、匠。君が見つけるべきディソードよ。
So that's gonna be, okay, so that's 4 if you include me. So the 3 are going to be Kozue, Senna, and oh my gosh, why am I blanking on who the other one is? Yua, right.
僕は手に入れられなかった。
Back at O-Front, I'd come so close, but in the end, I'd thrown it all away. I'd given up completely on getting a D-sword.
落ち込むことはないわ。機会はいくらでもやってくる。すでに匠は見えているんだから。それこそが君が黒騎士である証拠よ。
いつか手に入るのかな。
不浄なる邪神に打ち勝てば必ず。
What was wicked heart supposed to mean? Was she saying my heart was wicked and impure because of my perverted delusions or something? Oh god, it would not be easy to conquer that. Probably even impossible, WTF. Ayase let go of me and returned to her bed, and right when she did, she suddenly began undoing the buttons on her pajamas.
着替えるわ。
Flustered, I instantly looked away. I figured I should probably leave the room, but right as I went to,
そこにいて。
after hearing that, I couldn't move an inch. The only thing I heard after that was the sound of Ayase taking her clothes off, echoing throughout the quiet room. My thing is, where did she have the time to do all this? Because, I mean, I'm not sure when Sua came to, like, talk to her, but they mentioned about how the blood was fresh. How did she manage to, I guess if she's got the ability to, you know, create delusions and stuff, like to be able to sneak out of the hospital, apparently kill 2 people, and come back and nobody noticed. The hospital room wasn't very big. It was slightly larger than my base, but still pretty small. And so there I was, alone in a tiny room with Ayase, and she was right behind me, changing clothes. I could tell it was happening right behind my back. Shit, I was so nervous, but why? It made no sense. It wasn't like I wasn't used to this kind of stuff. There was a scene just like this in that Wanaroge. A slime girl appears with CGs by Higashi Matsuma.
なぜ目をそらすの、匠。
だって見ちゃまずいし。
My voice almost cracked as I spoke.
恥ずかしいのね。
綾瀬は恥ずかしくないの。
Was she trying to tell me that it was okay to look? I mean, I wasn't into 3D girls, not even remotely. That being said, if she was giving me permission to look, I wasn't going to say no.
惑わされているのよ、君は。 その感情こそが邪神に侵食されている証拠。
惑わされているって、誰に？
邪神王グラジオール。
I casually picked up the book on the bedside table in front of me. On the cover was The Gladiol Saga, Volume 17, the Book of Psalms and Revelation.
グラジオールって、なんなの？
邪悪なる存在。負の妄想の塊。人の心の闇に偏在する無意識の集合体。世界に破滅をもたらす神。言い方はいろいろ。
そいつは車椅子に乗ってるの？足が不自由とか？
グラジオールは人の形をしているとは限らないわ。もういいわよ、こっちを見ても。
I slowly turned back around to face Ayase. She's already done changing clothes, and for some reason she was now wearing her school uniform.
なんで制服に？
迫っているから、グラジオール覚醒の時が。いつでも動けるようにしておかないと。
Then wouldn't normal clothes be better? Well, whatever. What's done is done.
グラジオールがギガロマニアックスとどう関係してくるの？
ギガロ？何？
Ayase raised her eyebrows in confusion. It seemed she didn't know. Maybe gigalomaniac was just the term Senna used for them.
ギガロマニアックスだよ。セナはディソードを持つ力の持ち主のことをそう呼んでた。ディソードはディラックの海につながったパイプだとかなんとか。
呼び方は人それぞれかもしれないわ。ディソードは人の邪神を具現化したものよ。グラジオール記目視録詩編にそう書いてある。第3巻11章23節。予言書なのよ、それは。
She said that her gaze was fixated on the book in my hands.
みんなはこう言うわ。私が歌詞によって予知を行っていると。だけど私はグラジオール記目視録詩編からインスピレーションを受けているだけ。その詩編こそ予言の書なのよ。なぜ気づかないの？誰も。
予言の書って冗談でしょ？
事実よ。この渋谷で今まさに起きていることを、そしてこれから起きようとしていることをツイグラーは予言し物語にしている。
ツイグラー？
グラジオール記目視録詩編の作者。個人だけれどツイグラーは強大な黒騎士だったと思うわ、私は。
I was really starting to think that Black Knights were just her term for gigalomaniacs. And if the author of this book was a gigalomaniac, no wonder he could predict the future. I like the idea that she's just taking it from like a fantasy book. It'd be like somebody took, I don't know, The Lord of the Rings or something like really, really seriously, and they just basically dedicated their whole life to just the teaching of it. Although it seems like the way they say like Psalms and Revelations, it's almost like a Bible, but it seems like, I don't know, is it just written by like some sort of like fantasy sci-fi writer or something? I skimmed through the book I was holding, the Gladiol Saga, Volume 17, the Book of Psalms and Revelation, and what I saw shocked me. Oh gosh, oh no! Oh no, she cray-cray. Maybe she puts her delusions onto the book and she can read things, but oh no, I didn't see that coming. It was blank. No matter how many pages I turned, no matter where I looked inside the book, there wasn't a single word. What the hell? This is like Yua with her sister's book, or sorry, Mia. The whole thing with like the diary where she just cannot accept that it's, not what she thinks. I turned back to check the front cover. It wasn't a normal book cover. It was almost entirely blank. All that was written was the title and the author, not even the name of a publisher. Once again, I tried flipping through the book from the beginning, but even the first page was blank. And no matter how many pages I went through, I couldn't find a single one with any writing.
これ、不良品
Is this just like the ending where I just go along with my crazy goth girlfriend?
どういうこと？
Or am I gonna say like there's nothing here and she's gonna be like you're corrupted, I have to kill you too, and then I'm actually running away from Ayase, she's trying to kill me.
だって、これ全部白紙じゃないか。
何を言っているの？ちゃんと書かれているわ。何度も読んでいるのよ、私は。
そんなこと言ったって。ほら、
I shoved the open book right in Ayase's face.
どこからどう見ても真っ白だよ。
ちっとも白紙なんかじゃないわ。
いや、白紙だって。
ここに字が書いてある。見えないの？匠。
Was she screwing with me? Or was she actually being serious? Maybe Ayase had been a complete mental case all along, and I'd only realized it just now?
君には見えないのね。侵食されているからだわ。邪神王に。
Did I just turn into her enemy? Ayase was dead serious. She really didn't seem to be joking. In fact, I was pretty sure I'd never seen her crack a joke even once before. I took another look at the book, but I really didn't see a thing.
僕には白紙にしか見えないよ。
そう。
Ayase's shoulders drooped in disappointment, and she took the book from my hands. Her hands were cold to the touch.
考えたことがある？
何が？
世界は人によって見える形が違うということ。その差異を確かめることはできないわ。概念や認識を他人と完璧に一致させることは不可能だから。でもこれだけははっきりしている。君が見ているものと私が見ているもの。その違いは邪神による影響よ。
I mean, I say she's crazy, but I mean, I've had some insane delusions as well. We're just at different levels. Our delusions are just different, I guess. We're just equal level crazy, I guess? I don't
邪
know.
神の集合体が邪神をグラジオール。目覚めようとしている。もうすぐ。もしも目覚めたら、きっと。この世に67億ある世界は、邪神王が生む混沌によって混じり、溶け合うことになるわ。境界が消え、邪神により連結された世界になる
It'd
の
be
よ。
crazy if that's actually what happens at the
あら
end.
ゆるものが規
Is
則
it
性
goes
もなく
exactly
な
the
る。
way she says it's going to
あら
happen.
ゆるものが一瞬で死ぬ。概念も認識も因果律もすべて破壊される。
I mean, when you see how it ends, it's like, it's bad. Thousands of people do die. And it's not good.
すべてあるがゆえに何もない世界。あらゆる神話と同じように予言されているわ。
And like the people, Narose, I believe, the one of the bad guys, like they're talking about how to control people's their perception of things, and he wants to create like a new world. So it could be like just like the world is thrown into calamity, and then a new world emerges from this. So yeah.
終末予言。滅びの歌。
Was that really true? Was that what was written in this blank book? In the gladial book of Psalms and Revelation?
このままでは滅びの結末に至るだけ。今止められるのは私と君二人しかいないの。
どうして僕ら二人なの？
導きよ。他の黒騎士はすでに邪神王に侵食されてしまった。
Wait, Ayase had said earlier the blood on her was from the other Black Knights. Then again, she didn't specify that she killed them, right? She just kind of laughed when he's like, did you kill them? She killed them somewhere in the hospital? If she had, then where were all the bodies? Then right as I thought that, Ayase walked past me and placed her hand on the door.
どこ行くの？
おしっこよ。
Did not see. Okay, I didn't expect that from her. Oh my gosh. With a deadpan expression, she answered me, then headed off without waiting for my reply.
Huh?
I looked around the room, trying to find more volumes of the Gladiol saga, but no dice. I didn't know how many volumes there were in total, but the one I picked up before was the 17th. Volumes 1 through 16 were nowhere to be found. Of course, it was possible she just hadn't brought them to the hospital. Still couldn't believe the book was totally blank, despite seeing it with my own 2 eyes. And so I left the room before Ayase came back. So the hospital had this corner set up on the far end of the lobby. Countless PCs were lined up there, and they had all internet access, something I'd learned from the countless times I'd been here. Now that visiting hours had ended, all signs of life in the lobby had vanished. Even though it was so busy during the day, the lobby was now covered by an eerie silence, making it impossible for me to calm down. I'd definitely get kicked out if a nurse saw me, so I made a dash for the PCs. I wasn't an idiot. I knew a thing or two about Western mythos and stuff, and I'd learned it all from the anime, manga, and games I'd gone through. But even with all that, I'd never even heard of the Gladiol saga before. The first time I'd ever seen the name was when I looked into Ayase online. So, without further ado, time to look it up. I got quite a few results, way more than I expected actually, which worried me. Maybe I really was the only one who didn't know anything about it. But as I looked closely at the results, I noticed one common denominator. All of them had something to do with phantasm, or Fez. So it's like, did she create it all herself? Like, she's the one who made it all up? And she talked like the way that he described it, almost like it had been handwritten on the front of the book, like she had just written all of those things herself. It's her delusion, this whole Gladiol thing. Whenever the Gladiol saga was mentioned, it had to do with something Fess mentioned, or Phantasm's world building, and other stuff like that. It was all a bunch of hearsay. But no matter how much I searched, I couldn't find any discussion on the actual contents of the book. Oh, okay, so a series of high fantasy novels. Okay, so there's something there. I mean, maybe she's the one who wrote it. There was a wiki entry for it, but it barely even touched upon the premise. Fictional, a series of high fantasy novels based on the Eastern European myth of Gladiol, the wicked-hearted king. Told over the course of 23 volumes, it depicts the battle between the 7 Black Knights and Gladiol. It was written... Oh yeah, she did say Zilgler? It was written by R.C.O. Ziegler from 1929 to 1951. The series had been translated into several languages, but it never gained widespread appeal due to its rather esoteric writing style. That was all that was written there. Okay, the series is no longer in print in Japan, rendering it very difficult to find specifically. It says that. Compared to the pages on other legends, each of which were filled to the brim with information, this one felt a little lacking. Even the wiki page on D-Swords went into more detail than this. And since this was We Keep Pedophilia, I forgot it was called that, oh my god. The free encyclopedia that anyone could edit, there was really no way to verify its accuracy. Now I know, like, Wikipedia, which this is based on, although this definitely seems way more, I mean, just the name itself does not lend credibility. But, like, with Wikipedia, it's, like, you could edit it, but it can be very quickly, if you're, like, putting false information, it very quickly gets corrected. The picture on the D-Sword page had been entirely off the mark, for example. In the end, there was only one thought that kept coming to the forefront of my mind. What if the Gladiol saga was simply a product of Ayase's delusions? Maybe Ayase was trying to create some sort of Lovecraftian mythos or something. Hell, Lovecraft himself, if I remembered correctly, had used his books to share his crazed delusions with others. I said before about how, like, this would be like if someone based the Lord of the Rings and then, like, made their whole, you know, personality and made their whole way of living based on that. But yeah, I guess it'd make more sense to base it off Lovecraftian. Like, if you took the books and you're like, this is what I'm going to believe in. If that was what Ayase was doing with her songs, then all of this, even though it might have sounded kind of cool, was just a whole lot of crazy schizo bullshit. And to make things worse, Ayase didn't seem to realize that. She was confusing it with reality. Was everything Ayase told me nothing but her insane delusions? Maybe the whole apocalypse thing was simply some delusion she wanted to see. Typical Chunibyo stuff. Tortured kid who just wants to see the world burn.
ああ、それは僕もだった。
Hey, right? Yeah, exactly. So if that were true, then what exactly did Ayase actually want to happen? What kind of ending did she wish to reach? How did she want this legend to end? And was she someone I could trust?
信じるも何も。綾瀬しかいないじゃないか。
Rimi was gone, Senna was kind of scary, and Kozapi was unreliable. So it didn't matter how crazy she was. She could spout delusions all day for all I cared. Ayase was the only one I could rely on. Plus, she had a D-sword. I mean, she's got 3 of them. There's no denying it, and her songs really had prophesized the NewGen cases, whether they were based in delusion or not. Or, NewGen had been happening because her delusions were becoming reality. If anything, that just meant she was even more powerful than I thought. No harm in using that power to my advantage. I needed her. And luckily, for God knows what reason, she seemed to be interested in me. So as long as I took her words with a grain of salt, I'd probably be fine. Yep, it was all going to be just fine. When I came back to the hospital room,
悔いをって悔いをって闇夜を切り裂き月光を浴びて幾千もの鉄意は汝の痛みとなりて今解き放たれるやがて叫びは宙に舞い夜空は赤く染まるだろう
Ayase was sitting on her bed, eating some hospital food. She wasn't actually eating it. She was just listlessly poking her frozen tofu with her chopsticks, all while quietly singing a song. It was one of the prophetic phantasm songs, the one that had foretold the 3rd NewGen case, the crucifixion. It was called A Contract of Blood to Seal Our Sin. I was familiar with it myself as I had bought the album. But in this case, Ayase wasn't striking a stake. Rather, she was striking her chopsticks into her tofu. Or I suppose it was closer to stabbing. As soon as she saw me, she gave a faint smile, as if relieved about something.
戻ってこないかと思ったわどこへ行っていたの
ちょっと調べ物をロビーの PC で。
今日はここに泊まって一緒にいて
What? Really? I flinched instinctively at Ayase's bold request. Had I tripped a flag without noticing?
お腹空いていない食べてもいいわよ
She picked up some frozen tofu with her chopsticks and offered it to me.
それって綾瀬が食べたくないだけじゃ。
そうよ
She pursed her lips into a smile.
まずいの病院食は不浄な邪心に染まっているのねきっと
How she blames everything on the wicked heart. God damn it, wicked hearts this, wicked hearts that. Was that all she knew how to say? If the 2 of us were talking online, she'd have been banned for spamming by now.
邪心に染まってるのに僕は食べてもいいの？
普段から邪心まみれでしょ匠はコンビニのお弁当やカップ麺は不浄なる食べ物の最たる例よ黒騎士として覚醒するためには摂取をやめるべきだわ
綾瀬は普段は何を食べてるの？
チョコレート
I thought I was waiting for her to be like, I don't eat.
チョコレートって十分邪心に染まってそうな気がするけど。
Was that actually all she ate? Chocolate? Talk about an unbalanced diet. This was even worse than mine, WTF. And yet she's still so slim. Jealous girl, jealous.
チョコレートはいいわ。邪神を打ち払う力を持つのよ。
So this is what we've learned about her so far in this part of it, is she likes chocolate. That's something new that I've learned about her. Bullshit. You may talk fancy, but really, you just have a sweet tooth.
というわけで、匠。さあ、
Ayase brought the frozen tofu closer to my face. Yeah, I'll pass. I'm not really a fan of frozen tofu either.
いらない。
それは許されないわ。
Ugh, what the fuck was going on? This wasn't fair. So she doesn't want me to eat tainted food, and yet she's trying to feed me food that she says is tainted. Okay. It was every man's dream to hear a girl say, okay, say ah, so why did it do nothing for me? Maybe it was because the food was Ayase's unwanted leftovers. Or maybe it was because she was a 3D girl. Well, she definitely wasn't going to give up trying to feed me, so I reluctantly opened my mouth. As I chewed the tofu, the broth spread throughout my mouth. This also seems to be a thread between the last couple of endings, is a girl feeding him. Sometimes by
よく
force.
頑張ったわ。
This one is more like coercion.
これで一歩、黒騎士に近づいた
Okay, so
わ
she
よ。
wants him to become a Black Knight. But then she tells me to stop eating food that's tainted. Make it make sense. I sure didn't feel any closer.
次は、このきんぴらごぼうを。
Please, Ayase, no more. When she'd finished feeding me, Ayase had once again started going on about the Gladiol saga, but this time she really got into it. Even once the sun had started setting, she seemed oblivious to the fact the room was getting darker. Not once has she thought to turn on the lights. For the most part, though, she'd pretty much just gone in depth on the things she'd already mentioned prior to that. Nothing really new. And she wasn't exactly the most engaging storyteller, so now I was starting to get sleepy. Though considering Shogun was still out there, it probably wasn't smart to be dozing off.
というわけなのよ。理解できた？
I hadn't listened to a word she'd said, but I decided to just nod for now. But when I did, Ayase squinted at me, then moved in close.
聞いてなかったのね。
She usually didn't show much in the way of emotion, but I guess even she could get mad under the right circumstances. Maybe I should apologize for upsetting her.
それも、邪神に染まっているせいよ。
Oh my god, again with the wicked hearts.
先に取り除かなくてはならないようね。君の侵食した邪神を。でなければ、純粋なる邪神は培養されない。
Why do I have a feeling that this is going to be something like risque because she sees herself as pure? Why do I feel like she's going to be like, I will exercise it through either something violent or something sexual? That's just my thought.
取り除く?
What was she trying to do to me? By the sound of it, some kind of terrifying heart surgery? It gave me the chills just thinking about it. But it seems like my guess was off. Oh, with a slight sorrowful expression, Ayase licked her lips. I'd caught a quick glimpse of her pink tongue, and I must admit, that moment was extremely sexy.
君の邪神を取り除くために
I fucking
何で
called
も
it.
するわ。望みがあったら言って。
Anything? Well, I still didn't know what she meant by excise your impurity, but... Well then, how about, for starters?
キスでもしてもらおうか。
Despite the darkness, I could see the rigidness of her expression. Uh-oh, maybe I'd gone a little too far. I really didn't want her to start hating me, and I definitely didn't want her to abandon me, so I rushed to apologize. Or at least I tried to, but she didn't give me the opportunity. Instead, she grabbed me by the collar and shoved me right into a nearby closet.
何を?
She pressed her body up against mine, and then she closed the door behind us, leaving us tightly packed inside the closet. Did she, hear somebody come in? Or she thought she heard someone coming in? The closet was incredibly cramped. It wasn't designed for people. In order for two people to fit, they had to be pressed right up against each other. Didn't help I could feel Ayase's stifled breaths in my ear either. Maybe it was how dark it was, but the situation was really turning me on.
どうしたの？
看護師の見回りよ。
Oh, so that's why we were hiding. Visiting was prohibited at night, so obviously sleeping over was too. They found out I was here. They kicked me out immediately. Okay, but why was Ayase hiding with me, right? They're going to be searching for her.
この病院にも敵は多いわ。
Although she seems to leave her hospital room a lot, no one seems to notice.
敵？
グラジオールの使い。私たちの心を支配しようと、虎視眈々と狙っているのよ。
Even the nurses were our enemies?
それってただの被害妄想。
静かに。
I had no clue it brought it on, but Ayase suddenly sealed my lips with hers. Her lips were so soft. It was enough of a shock to make my mind go completely blank. That was when I heard the door open, and at the same time, some strange mechanical sound. Whoever they were trying to be stealthy, but I still had heard them come through the door.
いないわ。
I love that she's actually correct about the nurse being the enemy. I heard a female voice. I felt like I'd heard it before, but I couldn't exactly remember when.
逃げられたのかしら。まさか私たちの正体に気づかれた？ええ、不用意に接触しすぎたのかもしれない。
So now, like, he's fully gonna be like, wait a minute, Ayase was right all along. I'm gonna go right in 100% with her on her delusions. She was talking to someone, but I couldn't hear the other person's voice. She must have been on the phone. Ayase's lips were still glued to mine. Her sweet aroma lingered in the air. It smelled absolutely incredible. They were so soft. Not just her lips, but her breasts, her shoulders, her hips, her thighs. Every part of her body that pressed up against mine was soft as could be. There was probably someone really dangerous standing right outside the closet, but the thought didn't even register in my mind. I was completely lost in pleasure.
そっちの処理は済んだ？そう、これからなのね。わかったわ。私はスクランブル交差点に向かうから。それじゃあね。守る。あなたに信仰の救いあれ。
It seemed like they'd finished their conversation, and with that, the suspicious woman silently left the room. I could tell the coast was clear. It would probably be safe to come out of the closet now. But Ayase still hadn't let go of me, and then for only a moment she pulled her lips away from mine. She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes.
匠、私は導きで、君が救世主。そう決まっているの。だから、何をしてもいいのよ。私に。叶えてあげるわ。君の、どんな望みでも。
I didn't really get what she was trying to say. I figured she was probably just spewing her crazy delusions again, but either way I didn't mind.
匠。匠。
Ayase kissed me again. Except, this time, it was nothing like before. This time, Ayase's tongue, slick with saliva, forced my mouth open, shoved its way deep inside and coiled around my own. Nothing else mattered to me anymore. I just let myself give in to the pleasure, embracing Ayase's slender, supple hips. No, we're gonna skip this. I hate the kissing sound effects. I hate them. Bleh, bleh, bleh. Gross mouth sounds. It was becoming a little hard to breathe. When I tried inhaling, I just ended up sucking into Ayase's hot breaths. Nah, how long is this gonna go on for? Ew, wet mouth sounds. Ayase's saliva spilled into my mouth. It tasted incredibly sweet. I swallowed it with audible gulps. My brain was completely paralyzed, mesmerized to the core. I'd never expected the touch of a 3D girl to feel this good. Oh, gunshot. That would have been, what's his face? Suwa shooting Bon, right? I heard a sharp sound off in the distance. Startled by the noise, Ayase backed away. And then, like, she said she was going to the scramble crossing. That would be when I'd be summoned to go to the crossing, right?
今の音は
Her lips were soaked in the mixture of her saliva. Even in the darkness, it was clearly visible. I couldn't care less about the sound. I just wanted to get back to making out with Ayase. And, if possible, go even further beyond. Hell yeah, losing my B card for the win. What if that was like because she said, I'll do anything you want? Like, instead of saving the world, that's my focus, apparently. Wait, hold on. Had Ayase been with other men before? If so, wouldn't that kind of bring down the whole experience? Or maybe Eroge just rotted my brain. Nah, there was no way Ayase had past experience. No normie would want to stick their dick in someone this crazy after all. I mean, even Misumi-kun had run away from her.
ヘラヘラしていないで、匠。
さあせん。
Ayase had slapped me. My hopes and dreams were dashed in an instant. And in their place, anxiety arose. Felt like I was about to cry. Ayase was staring daggers at me, but I couldn't help but cling on to her all the same.
ごめん。嫌わないで。
邪神に支配されるのではなく、邪神を己に取り込むのよ。でなければ、黒騎士として目覚めることはできない。それを忘れないで。
Pretty sure the reason I'd gotten all turned on was because of the kiss, not all this wicked heart stuff, but I couldn't be bothered trying to argue with her.
行くわよ。
どこへ？
銃声だったわ。さっきの音。
A gunshot? Here? In Japan? In a hospital? It hadn't sounded like one to me. Then again, I'd only ever heard them in movies and video, so it wasn't like I'd had any frame of reference as to what a real one sounded like.
銃声だったとして何をしに行くの？
これもまた予言にあったわ。すでに邪神王との戦いは始まっているのよ。黒騎士の心が殺されていく。だから回収するの。理想道。私たちにできるのはそれだけ。
The Black Knights were going to perish. Had that bullet we'd heard been fired at someone? So this is the one where instead of trying to save anyone, we just let all of the Gigalomaniacs die so we can just get their swords.
ダメよ。警察も邪神に支配されてしまっている。
I hear she's right. Like, she sounds crazy, but she is right about stuff. Like, they have been infiltrated by Sua. When you think about the stuff that happens in this game, is the stuff that she's saying really all that crazy? We were reaching unprecedented levels of schizo here. Ayase had completely lost it. The Gladiol saga was nothing more than a delusion of hers. Everything she had said was nothing more than a delusion of hers. I had asked myself earlier what kind of ending she wished to reach, and I was still asking. Seriously, what was her end goal here? And what the hell was I supposed to do?
ついてきて、匠。
Ayase was already on her way out. I hesitated to follow her. But that was when I realized. Oh my god, I didn't even catch that. How did I not notice that? The 3D swords leaning against the wall or window were gone. Had she taken them with her? I bit my lip, hesitating for just a moment longer, but in the end, I decided to follow after her. I noticed them immediately when I walked into the room initially, and like, I don't know how I didn't catch that. I guess it's easier to notice something that shouldn't be there than notice something not be there. Ayase had gone straight for the rooftop. It was almost as if she knew exactly where the gunshot had come from. There was no hesitation as she walked. The hospital's roof had been turned into some sort of garden. The plants were all fully grown, and the flowers were in full bloom, but it was too dark to tell what color they were. I hid behind Ayase and took a look around. I couldn't sense anyone there. In fact, I didn't sense any signs of life at all. Had the gunshots really come from here? Even if they had, who'd fired it? Guns weren't exactly common in Japan.
やっぱり戻ろうよ。もし撃たれたらまずいよ。
But Ayase didn't listen to my pleas. Instead, she moved even farther into the garden, meaning I pretty much had to follow her. And then I saw a dim blue light in front of me. was extremely faint, as if it'd go out at any moment, but it was undeniably there, flickering in the darkness.
理想度だわ。
Okay, is that Yua's? I can't remember what Yua's looked like, but she was here. She was at the hospital when she got her D-sword. It was unendingly elegant, and yet possessed a razor-sharp edge as if it longed to cut down all around it. Its presence was completely otherworldly. It's definitely not mine. Mine looks way different. Two people were lying on the concrete near the D-sword. Oh, shit. Yeah, Yua's dead. I recognized them.
Yua!
The girl in the school uniform with eyes pointed up at the sky was Yua, no doubt about it. What was she doing here? And the other person was a middle-aged man. Looking at him closely, I realized it was the same detective that had questioned me after the crucifixion case. They were both lying on the ground, completely still. I carefully approached them. That was when I noticed the puddle of blood around them. I jumped back in shock, but it was too late. The crimson liquid had already colored the bottom of my shoes. The detective's body was especially soaked in blood. Yua, on the other hand, didn't seem to be wounded. What the hell had happened here? Why were Yua and the detective together? Now that I knew there was a detective involved, the gunshot made more sense, but who had he shot at? Yua? A million questions were racing through my head. So many, in fact, that I couldn't even begin to organize them. I couldn't handle the confusion, so I turned to Ayase for help. Looking as solemn as ever, she ignored the detective and approached Yua's body. Stopping right in front of the pool of blood, she kneeled beside Yua and felt her neck with her fingers.
脈はある。まだ生きているわ。だけど、死んでいる。心は。そっちの男の人は、もうダメなようね。
She was speaking in her usual indifferent tone.
なんで、そんな落ち着いていられるんだ。人が死んでるんだぞ。
言ったでしょ。予言されていたからよ。
The fuck do you mean, foretold?
綾瀬が望んだ妄想じゃないの。
そうかもしれないわね。それを確かめる術はないけれど。
そんな。
構わないわ。原因が何だろうと。
Then Ayase stood up. And pulled her D-sword out of thin air. Is she gonna, like, take Yua out for good? She took her D-sword, glowing bright red, and touched it against the D-sword that was stuck into the ground. Suddenly, a high-pitched resonance reverberated through the air. A resonance so shrill it felt like a drill was carving a hole in my ear. Or at least, that was the image the feeling evoked. Immediately after the sound began, the shapes of the two D-swords began to effortlessly distort. Their transformation completely ignored the laws of physics. It was like they were made of liquid or clay. The two swords warped repeatedly, as with writhing in pain. The resonating sound only got worse. Unable to bear it, I tried plugging my ears, but it didn't help in the slightest. Until suddenly a shockwave rippled through the air. Before I could even begin to understand what was happening, the D-sword in the ground was in Ayase's left hand. Ayase must have been in agony. Her expression made that very clear. But only a moment later she looked at me and smiled. She was even blushing slightly, almost like she was aroused or something.
4本目よ。これで。
She's like, gotta collect them all. Even though there were corpses right in front of her, and whoever shot the middle-aged detective was probably still nearby. How could she put that sword over literally everything else? Was it really that necessary to get the ending she wished to reach? Did she really need all 7 D-swords to defeat Gladiol? Did Gladiol even exist?
ギガロマニアックスとなったものは誰だろうと一度は壊れているんだよ。
I remembered what Senna had told me. I supposed that meant Ayase had also broken at some point. Did that mean I'd eventually break too? Well, the eventually was probably unnecessary. After all, I already felt like I was going to break thanks to everything happening with Ayase. Ayase quickly erased the D swords, and two of them vanished as if dissipating into the air itself.
このこと警察に通報するの
Yua was my enemy. I wouldn't lose any sleep about leaving her body here among all this carnage. But I had already stepped in the blood. My shoes were leaving red footprints all over the pavement, which would yet again be enough to make me a suspect.
通報はしないわ。
A wave of relief washed over me. Ayase was gazing up at the night sky. Her expression still seemed slightly sorrowful.
そろそろね。
Drawing near? What was?
グラジオールは間もなく目覚めるわ。ツイグラーの予言によれば。心して、匠。最悪に包まれるのよ。世界は。
I mean, once again, she's not wrong.
君は見たこともない世界を見ることになる。でも乗り越えてそうしなければグラジオールを倒せない。
Ayase's voice lacked its usual composure. It was almost like she was scared. Would it really be that bad? Whatever was about to happen? Or, should I say, the delusion that she was about to turn into reality?
まだ心の準備が
だったら急いで。もう時間がないわ。
Ready myself? Colonel, that's easier said than done. I don't even know what you think is supposed to happen, so what am I supposed to do?
世界は誘拐し連結が始まる。
Ayase mumbled that to herself, looking up at the sky. I decided to look up at it too. Oh, in the sky, I could see a single spot dyed a vivid white, a white so bright it stuck out like a sore thumb in the night sky. What even was that? I gulped. Come to think of it, hadn't some people reported that the sky turned white right before the last earthquake? The white spot was gradually expanding. It had an inexplicable sense of restlessness to it. It left me completely speechless.
グラジオールが目覚めた。
The earth trembled, the building shook. No, it wasn't just the building shaking. Everything was. The white spot in the sky grew even bigger. Then we were immediately assaulted by a violent buzzing noise, one that sounded similar to the resonance of the D-sword from before. My head felt like it was about to explode. And then... the world was dyed completely white. Alright, now let's have some stuff actually happen. It's just been mostly Ayase just babbling about Gladiol and the Black Knights and Wicked Hearts. So let's see the aftermath of the earthquake. Was I dreaming? Even though it had been white only a moment ago, the sky was dyed red. The world itself had turned to a rusty vermilion. Because we haven't really seen him, like, experience the direct aftermath of the earthquake too much. Well, I guess we have, like, him wandering the streets, but he wasn't outside for it when it happens, usually. This couldn't be real. It had to be just another delusion, or at least that was what I tried to tell myself. Like, the last couple of playthroughs, whenever this happened, I was basically in my bunker or in my room, and I didn't really experience any of it with, like, both Nanami and with Yua. All across the sky I could see clouds upon clouds of black miasma. They seemed almost humanoid in shape. They had to be illusions, though, even if they were unusually vivid. The clouds of haze spontaneously flickered in and out of sight. Even when I thought one had disappeared, it would pop up somewhere else a moment later. The blots of black miasma were innumerable. Just looking at them made me feel uncomfortable. And there was this intense, rotten-smelling stench. It was so bad it nearly brought me to vomit. I didn't want to be here for even a second longer. That feeling was as strong as could be. When I came to, the sky had brightened up a little, and Shibuya had transformed into a city of death. AH Hospital was still standing, but cracks ran up the walls, and the interior was in complete disarray. I only barely managed to make it out. The entrance to the outpatient clinic was swarmed with ambulances. The place was overflowing with people trampling over each other, fighting for medical attention. When I'd woken up, Ayase had smiled at me and said, "Let us return to Shibuya." It'd been just before 6 a.m. at that point, which meant that I'd been out for over 10 hours. Yui's body was nowhere to be found. I asked Ayase if she knew what had happened to it, but she didn't seem to know. Now, usually when this happens, like, this is, like, towards the end of, you know, like, when we see this point here, but there should still be a decent amount left. Feels like I haven't really done anything so far. Shibuya was hardly a 5-minute train ride from Yoyogi, but due to the earthquake, all public transport was on halt. The railroad had been torn to shreds, meaning there was no way it was going to be restored within the day. So we were forced to walk, something that was way harder than it sounds. The road was full of holes, and rubble from fallen buildings was constantly in our way. It was difficult to even walk in a straight line. I mean, we still have to do what Ayase wants, right? We still have to get the other swords from Kozue and Senna. And then I got to get my sword. As a result, the trip back to Shibuya Station ended up being a 3-hour struggle. The surrounding area had been completely annihilated. Almost all of the buildings had collapsed. Countless bodies were strewn out all around us. They were so pitiful, I couldn't stand to look at them. There was also a number of people still alive. Some were like us, just wandering along in complete shock, while others were crouched by the rubble waiting for help to arrive. And of course, there were many people clinging on to dead bodies as they bawled their eyes out. Even though they had survived, they all still seemed dead, like the trauma had drained them of every ounce of life they'd once had. A terrible odor of blood and dust filled the air, making even the act of breathing completely unbearable. Was this Gladiol's doing? Was Gladiol the name of the earthquake, maybe? I suppose that would make sense. They always gave hurricanes names in America, like Andrew or Katrina. Was this how Ayase wanted things to end? Was this the ending she wished to reach? And again, if you wanted to bring about the apocalypse, this would probably be the best way to do it. But there was no way a single person could cause a catastrophe on this scale, even with the powers of a gigalomaniac, or a Black Knight as Ayase liked to call them. She'd said that the world shall fuse and all shall be consolidated, or whatever, but what exactly had she meant by that? While following behind Ayase through the city, I took a peek at the side of her face. Unsurprisingly, even Ayase had turned pale when faced with the current state of Shibuya. She walked in silence, clenching her jaw as if trying to endure an intense pain.
Oi, minna! Koko wa abunai kara! Hinan basho e ikou!
A middle-aged man in a suit was screaming into the crowd. He was calling out to all the survivors in the area, us included.
救助を待ってたら日が暮れてしまう。避難場所まで行けばきっとなんとかなる。ここに留まっているよりずっとマシだ。辛いかもしれないが、立って歩こうじゃないか。俺たちには亡くなった人たちの分まで生きなくちゃならない使命があるんだ。
Where the hell had that old guy gotten so much energy from? A few people listened and started moving toward him, but most people stayed put. Ayase didn't even look at him. She just kept on moving toward her destination, and I had no choice but to follow. Suddenly, I felt a throbbing pain in my forehead. Ever since we'd left Yoyogi, I'd been getting headaches just like this.
頼むよ。みんな、立ってくれ。どうしてわからないんだ。ここは危ないんだって。瓦礫の下敷きになったらどうするんだ。俺はみんなに生きていてほしいんだよ。
My head hurt. What the? Suddenly, the world was dyed red once more. The sky was covered by vermilion clouds. It was the exact same thing I'd seen in my dream. The asphalt of the road, the concrete of the debris, the buildings, the shattered glass on the ground, the abandoned, broken-down cars, the uprooted trees from the sidewalk, all of it had been corroded, overtaken by rust. Maniacal laughter echoed throughout the area. It was coming from the same person who'd been trying to get everyone to take refuge just a second ago. His body was covered in a cloud of black miasma. But it wasn't just him. Excluding the dead bodies, there were clouds of miasma around everyone I could see. The hazes were nearly human-sized. They swayed back and forth rhythmically, each one unusually vivid. It was a horrifying sight. It was exactly like in my dream. That Man's laughter was starting to annoy me. Looking back toward him, I noticed that, for some odd reason, he had an assault rifle pointed straight at me.
今なら警察いないから殺し放題じゃないか
He started spraying bullets. I immediately hit the ground. I'd been shot. Or, so I thought. I had undoubtedly been standing right in his line of fire. But I didn't feel any pain. I lifted up my head to double check.
避難場所に行けば水や食料それに毛布もあるここに
This
と
is
どまっ
like
ていても意味はないんだ
this was like when he looked into the mind of the nurse, right? He wasn't holding a gun anymore. He was just pleading with the crowd around him.
さあ生きる気力を持とう無駄死に
But it all changed so suddenly. For a split second, the man's body was covered in static. Before the static, he'd had his hand raised up in the air, but after it, the hand was holding a gun. Doing that so quickly was humanly impossible. It was barely even coherent. It couldn't possibly be real. It was almost like watching a movie with severely jarring jump cuts. And then he started firing again. The people that were shot fell to the ground, blood spurting everywhere. Their screams echoed through the air. And yet, somehow, none of the bullets were hitting me. It really felt like I was in a movie. It wasn't real life.
Takumi.
When I heard my name, I came back to my senses. Ayase was staring at me. She looked like she was about to say something. But in the end, she didn't. She simply turned her back and kept on walking. I took a look at the sky. It was cloudy, but not red. The surrounding scenery was overcast by a dark gray, no vermilion in sight. The shooter had gone back to pleading with everyone to evacuate. All the people who had been shot were now unharmed, and none of them were engulfed by black miasma. What the hell had just happened? Another one of my delusions? If it had actually been, then I must have really lost my touch. That delusion hadn't been even slightly realistic. It'd been like a movie or a video game or something.
Takumi, 早く来て.
Ayase urged me forward. Where the hell was she going anyway? Was she heading for the evacuation site? The one the guy was yelling about? I'm guessing she's probably looking for Senna and Kozue. But if that were true, then she wasn't going the right way. Instead, she went right into the Inokashira line station. What the hell was she thinking? There were no staff members at the station, and the trains were all stopped in place. Ayase made her way down to the tracks and started walking along them. I think this is also where you go to get to the secret entrance to wherever the Noah 2 is, right? Naturally, the tunnel was pitch black. It wasn't designed to be traversed on foot, after all. It hadn't collapsed yet, but it felt like it was only a matter of time before it did. I would have never imagined that I'd end up walking on railroad tracks like this. What an adventure, though. They should make a movie about it. Wait, I'm pretty sure there already was one. Granted, it had come out before I was born, so I obviously hadn't seen it. I just knew it was about some people walking down railroad tracks to find a body. Alright, this is obviously a reference to something. I'm assuming a Japanese movie. I have no idea what it is, though. Meanwhile, walking through this underground tunnel wasn't nearly as exciting. If we continued along this route, we'd eventually pass by the Shinsen, Komaba Todaime, Ikano, and Shimokitazawa stations. Getting in and out of Shibuya had been incredibly difficult, so using the subway tunnels was actually a pretty good escape plan. But we'd started in Yoyogi, and now we were heading toward Shibuya, so something told me that Ayase wasn't using this as an escape route.
どこへ行くの?
深センの駅よ。
What the hell was the point of going there? Maybe she was planning to head to Sume from there? Or maybe my base? Actually, I had never told her where my base was, so probably not the second one. Speaking of which, I wondered if Seraton had survived. What if the conference hall had collapsed because of the earthquake? Oh god, all my poor waifus could be buried in rubble. Suddenly, my trivial concerns were interrupted by a bright light. There was a railroad crossing right before Shinsen Station, where lights from the sky peeked in from above. After the crossing, the rails went into another dark tunnel, and after that was the Shinsen Station platform. The lights at the platform were out, likely due to the earthquake. It was pretty damn dark. There was almost no one around. All I could see were two girls sitting on the platform. Judging by their uniforms, they were Sume students. Is she just gonna go right up and just kill them? Ayase approached them without a hint of hesitation. Maybe she knew them or something. As we got closer, their figures in the darkness became clearer. My brow furrowed. I felt like I'd seen them somewhere before. And then I realized exactly who they were. Senna, Kozupi. But something was wrong with them. They should have been able to hear us coming, but they didn't even turn to look at us. No, they just sat there, their heads looking down at the ground, not moving. Oh, are they dead already? I guess Ayase doesn't have to kill anybody if they're already dead. I tried calling out to them, but the two didn't respond. What the hell was up with them? Now, is this the work of Suwa, or did they just die from something else? Wait, no fucking way. I rushed over to the girls in a panic, then peered into Senna's eyes. Senna's eyes were devoid of life. They were completely hollow. With no light left within them, they stared into nothingness. Those sharp eyes of hers, always glaring at everyone and everything. Not a single trace of them remained. She was trying to murmur something, but her voice was so incredibly faint. All that came out was a mere croak. I couldn't make out a single word she had said. Kozupi was the same. A light behind her eyes had died out. Her mouth hung open, drool trickling down her cheek. She tried to speak, but her voice was too hoarse to understand. Something had happened to them. What the hell was going on in this city? I was absolutely clueless, so I turned to Ayase for answers, but she didn't seem remotely interested in their fates. Their D-swords were lying nearby. Ayase took her own sword and brought it near them. The same shrill sound from before reverberated throughout the station. The 3 D-swords began to warp and transform. Then came the shockwave, assaulting my body like a fierce gust of wind. And once it passed, Ayase was holding Senna and Kozupi's D-swords. Blushing in apparent arousal, Ayase looked at me.
Takumi, あとは君が手に入れるだけよ。
How the hell could she be so calm right now? My frustration was then met by the same throbbing pain in my head as before. The world turned red once again. Everything began rusting, rotting, and eroding away. I could smell a strong odor coming from Kozupi. Kozupi slowly rose up from the ground. Her entire body was dyed red. Was it blood or rust? Kozupi raised her head. Her face was covered by a black miasma. The sheer bloodthirst coming from her was terrifying. Kozupi stretched out her thin arms as if to try and strangle me. But when I blinked, she had somehow ended up back on the ground. Her head hanging downward, she had an indescribable expression on her face. Static rang in my ears, and Kozupi instantly teleported beside me. The black miasma grazed my shoulder. It just, I don't know why it made me think of like the meme about like teleporting behind someone to be like nothing personal or a kid or something like that. A ghastly cold sent a chill down my spine. Her whispers were emotionless and robotic, but that only made them all the more horrifying. I blinked once more. Senna's body was slumped over on the ground. She had been cut to pieces. Kozupi violently swung down her arms and stabbed Senna in the head with a shard of glass. Dark blood stained Senna's long, beautiful black hair. Kozupi then raised the piece of glass in the air and stabbed her once more. Static. Now Kozapi was on the ground instead of Senna, and Senna had mounted a homeless man that had appeared out of nowhere. Her head was buried in his shoulder. Her head was moving up and down constantly. What was she doing? Her hair was covering her face. Oh god, is she doing like what her mother did to her sister, or like eating the baby? Or like tearing its flesh out? Ugh. Ugh. So I couldn't really tell. That is, until she finally looked up. The man's shoulder was stained in blood. His flesh was minced like ground beef, and I could even make out a little bit of pink muscle glistening from within. Wait, no. Was it blood? Muscle? Rust?
I hear.
Senna finally turned around, and I could now see the blood surrounding her mouth. She was chewing on something, devouring it. My legs trembled, and the second I lost my balance and collapsed to the ground, the world returned to its original color. My headache vanished, too. I pressed my hand against my forehead and shook my head intensely. I felt extremely sick, like I was about to vomit. It didn't really feel like a panic attack or shock or anything like that. It was more like a poison was slowly trickling through my veins, spreading through my entire body. One that hit me with a horrible sinking feeling that weighed heavily on my mind. I raised my head and looked at Senna and Kozapi. They were still where they had originally been, on the ground, motionless.
どうしたの?
Ayase held out her hand. It was the same look from earlier, one that told me she had something more to say. I took her hand and stood up from the ground. Like, if I get my D sword, is she immediately going to attack me to get my sword, and then that way she's like, I have all of them, haha. We left Senna and Kozapi as they were. I wanted to help them, but I really didn't have the strength to do so, and Ayase just didn't care in the slightest. Alright, so here we are, except we're not going to run into anybody, because they're all dead. We made our way back towards Shibuya Station. On the way, we saw countless wounded people on the ground, and just as many dead bodies lying around. Ayase looked up to the sky with her usual distant expression. Trying to stave off my nausea, I asked her a question.
Ayase waどんな結末を望むの?
It feels very fourth wall breaky, like, what ending are we going for? And she's like, we're going for my ending.
結末?
Rimi was missing in action. Senna and Kozabi had both had their minds broken. Ayase had already taken the D-swords from all the Gigalomaniac girls. Or maybe stolen would be more appropriate. She had to have orchestrated all of it. How could she have not? There was no way she just happened to find a bunch of out-for-the-count, mind-broken Gigalomaniacs that had had all their D-swords out. There was just no way. If she was behind it all, then the earthquake was also her doing. And Gladiol was just a legend she'd made up. So is he gonna get his D-sword and then attack her thinking she's behind everything?
この地震が綾瀬の妄想じゃないって言い切れる。綾瀬だって望んでたんでしょ。
そうね。
なんでこんなこと。
匠、結論を急がないで。すでに予言されていたの。セイムラーによって。私はそれを知っていた。ただそれだけ。
グラジオール機は綾瀬の妄想じゃないか。そんな本 どこにも存在しないよ。
匠も見たはずよ。私の病室で。
ああ、見たよ。でもあれは白紙だった。
匠に見えていなかっただけよ。
そんなの詭弁だ。嘘だ。僕を騙そうっていうのか。
世界は約67億ある。つまり人類の全人口よ。異なっているの。それぞれの見ている世界は全く同一であることはないわ。匠と私もそう。
それが本当だって言うならそう出してよ。どうせ無理なんでしょ。
Ayase stared at me, then furrowed her brow. She seemed a little perplexed. It was almost like she was forcing herself not to show any emotion.
見たいの？私が見ている世界を。
できるならやってみてよ。たとえ見せられても信じないだろうけど。
違うわ、匠。君はもう
Oh, is that like the moments where she sees the blood, the like all the vermilion or whatever? Like that's what she sees?
私の世界と
Yeah, I'm guessing so.
君は少しずつ同期し始めているのよ。
何を
The world rusted over once more. Those collapsed on the ground were engulfed by black miasmata. I could see the head of a child crushed by the debris poking out through the cracks, and a man who was probably their dad trying to save them. Static rang in my ears again, and then in an action that was incomprehensible to me, the dad stomped on the child's head. Their head split open like a watermelon, and was subsequently crushed by their father's foot. Blood and gray matter splashed onto the ground. The static came again. The child's head was now completely intact. I could hear their dad cry out to them, "Hold on, I'll get you out of there." So, like, I'm seeing the good of humanity, she's seeing the evil. All the wicked hearts, right? Static. The child had escaped from beneath the rubble, and now they were stabbing their father over and over again with a knife. You're fucking useless, you old fuck, they jeered. A young couple were sitting in a somewhat remote spot. The two were under the same blanket, huddled next to each other. When the static came again, it engulfed the two of them, and the band began to rape her. Her screams echoed loudly throughout the city. Damn. Yeah, she's definitely been broken. Is this what she just sees all the time? Is this, like... Jesus. But the screams stopped with more sounds of static, and the two were back together as if nothing had happened. Two middle-aged women were limping down the road. They were likely sisters. Static flashed, and one of them grabbed the other by the hair in an instant. She then began to yank on it in an attempt to uproot it completely. With the fierce sound of tearing, she mostly succeeded. The static soon flashed again, and her hair was back to normal.
なんだよこれ
Careful what you wish for, Takumi.
私の世界よ。
Is he not going to be able to go back? Like, once they're fully synchronized, is this what he's going to see and he's just going to go fully insane? It was her world. It wasn't my delusion, but Ayase's? Wait, was it even a delusion? Or was it reality? A black miasma was hovering over Ayase's chest too. But really, I didn't want to see any of them anymore, so I instinctively looked away.
匠の見ていた空はどんな色をしていた？
どんな青い
あんな色？
Ayase pointed up to the sky. It was a shade of red. What if she was just very colorblind? That's just the whole thing behind this. She just can't see colors right.
あれは赤土色だ
赤土色？
I mean, the name of her route's pretty cool, but like with the whole thing with like silent sky, crying sky, missed opportunity to call it like red sky, vermilion sky.
あの色は青じゃないのね。
どこからどう見ても青空じゃないよ常識的に考えて
でも私にとってはあの色が青なのよ。
What was she saying?
匠は説明できるの。青色ってどんな色？
どんなってだから空の色
あの色の空しか知らないのよ。私は。
みんな青がどんな色かぐらい知ってるでしょ。
だから説明して。例えを使わず
It
に。
is tricky. How do you explain the color of blue? For someone who can't see it, without an example, how was I supposed to... I tried thinking up a way to explain it, but I came up empty-handed. I just couldn't come up with a way to describe the color blue. Upon noticing my complete loss for words, Ayase gave me a sad smile.
世界は約67億ある。
Maybe if we could get her to see our world, maybe that would like chill her out a bit.
空の色も67億通りある。みんな見ているものが同じだとは限らないわ。
Oh, thank goodness, but we don't have to just see that for the rest of this. The scenery went back to normal. This color was my world's.
綾瀬は ずっとあんな世界を見てき
Yeah, I
た。
bet ever since she got, like, tortured, that's probably... Maybe she's like, I used to see something else. And then that happened to me, and now that's what I see. Ayase gave a slight nod.
生まれた時からずっと
Oh, ever since she was born. Okay.
それが
I mean, maybe that's why
当
she
たり
ended
前
up
のことだ
going
と思っていたわ。
to get
世界の構造として
experimented on in the first place because she was different.
違
Damn.
うのね。今匠の話を聞いて理解できたわ。
あの黒いもやは何なの？
写真よ。誰でも持っているものなの。人ならば。そしてこの写真が
I guess that would explain why she doesn't want to socialize with anyone if she just sees everybody as evil.
見えた。人々の負の妄想が。
Wait, was the static causing negative delusions to bubble to the surface? Was that why I'd been seeing all that inhuman savagery?
私は昔から見てきた。黒騎士ならば程度の差はあってもみんな見えているはずよ。そこにあるのはむき出しの悪意、むき出しの欲望。
Had Ayase been seeing a world like that ever since she was born?
匠、私が望む結末はこの錆びついた世界から魂ごと抜け出すこと。
I can see why she wanted to go into that other world, like when she jumped off the roof. If you see your world like that ever since you were
グ
born,
ラジオールを倒さなければならないのよ。
Ayase moved closer to me.
だから見つけて。あとは匠だけなの。理想像を見つけて。
無理だ。
Unable to bear it any longer, I pushed Ayase away by her shoulders. Her eyes opened wide in shock.
なぜ諦めるの？
僕は綾瀬が思うほどすごい人間じゃない。どれだけ望んでも理想度が手に入る兆候すらないじゃないか。オーフロントの時もそうだったし、地震が起きてからもそうだ。方法がわからないんだ。理想度なんて手に入れられないよ。自信がないよ。
それならなぜ私を助けたの？
Ayase drew even closer. I took a step back, trying to stay away from her.
助けたって一体何のことを？
私が学校の屋上から飛び降りた時、君が花壇のある世界を生み出した。だから私は一つ上のステージに魂を移すことはできなかったわ。
That was a fluke. I hadn't done it intentionally.
それでもいいと思った。君の力を知ることができたから。あの時から君が私の希望になったから。
Please don't place all your hope in someone on a whim. Please stop expecting anything from me.
匠、自分を卑下しないで。それは邪神王の精神侵略よ。負けてはいけないわ。君には力がある。確実に手に入れられる。必ず理想度。
無理だ。無理だよ。
Before, I thought I might as well just stick with Ayase. I had no one else that could have protected me after all. But the more time we spent together, it became very clear to me. I couldn't understand how Ayase thought at all. The difference in how our minds perceived the world around us was just too great. And if I was being honest, I was fed up with how fucking batshit insane she was. She was a complete mental case through and through. I really am a horrible person, and I've always been that way. I've never changed.
なぜそんなことを言うの？
Ayase clung to me, tears welling in her eyes. It wasn't the calm, aloof Ayase I was used to.
私はこんな世界にいたくない。お願い、解放して。私の希望になって。黒騎士として目覚めて。
無理だよ。
無理じゃないわ。
I synchronized with her world once again. A black miasma poured out of Ayase's chest, and it twined itself around my body. It slithered around the top of my skin, like an anaconda slowly strangling its prey to death. Its repulsive, chilling presence was enough to give me goosebumps. It was Ayase's pure, unadulterated desire. I, just like any other person, wasn't used to seeing people's naked emotions. A flash of static.
君は私の希望。
Ayase stared at me, her eyes dyed pitch black.
君を離さないわ。つなぎ止める。どんな手を使ってでも。
Ayase's fingers started undoing my jacket buttons one by one.
君が欲しいの。
She was as close as could possibly be, just like the time we'd made out in the hospital room closet. I was like a deer in headlights. I couldn't move. Once she finished undoing all my buttons, my chest was exposed. But she didn't stop. She moved down, took off my belt, and unzipped my pants.
君の力が欲しいの。
Is she gonna kill me right now? I was saying about how, like, maybe she wants me to get the sword, the D sword, and then she was gonna kill me, but I was like, oh, she might not even let me get that chance. Ayase's ice-cold fingertips caressed my chest, and then her nails dug into me. The pain was so intense, and yet I still couldn't move an inch.
欲しいのよ。
Her fingers gouged out, oh Jesus, my flesh. They raked their ways to my bones. This is just an illusion. This is just an illusion. This isn't happening, right? Her hand reached deep inside, then gently embraced my pounding heart. My wicked heart. I was trembling, out of fear, out of pain, out of the cool sensation of Ayase's fingers.
あったかい。もらうわね。
やめ
I could feel my blood vessels exploding. Copious amounts of blood spilled from my chest. She took it out. My heart. There we go. The world switched colors in an instant. It had gone back to its original dull color. The rust had vanished, and I was completely unharmed. I put my hand on my chest. Thankfully, I could feel it beating. My heart was still there. Ayase was standing in front of me, clutching herself with both arms. She looked so incredibly sad, like she was about to burst into tears at any moment. There it was again, the same look as when she had taken Yua's D-sword. The same as when I had first seen her world back at the Scramble Crossing. The same as when she had obtained Senna's and Kozupi's D-swords. Ayase looked at me on the verge of tears, doing everything she could to hold them back.
首。そんなつもりじゃないの。写真を制御できなくなっている。私も。
Maybe she's gonna kill herself? She'd be like, I'm too far gone if you can't
取り
save
込み
me.
すぎたせいかもしれない。理想度。写真王の精神侵食で、私はおかしくなりつつある。
Wasn't it all just another one of her delusions? Wasn't it all just fake words meant to trick me? Those thoughts suddenly came to mind, but I didn't say them out loud. I just couldn't. Well, she could still hear what I'm saying, right? In my head. Ayase was a girl who rarely showed any emotion, with her unwavering tone giving her clear command of any conversation she had. That was why it was so hard to see her like this. I had never seen her so sad before. She looked so fragile, like she could fall apart at even the slightest touch. Because of that, I knew that I couldn't tell her what I was really thinking.
僕はどうすればいい
When those words left my lips, the slightest of tears began to flow from the corner of her eyes. She looked to me with a gaze that showed how much she truly needed me.
私は支配されつつあるわ。写真をこのままじゃ自我を保てない。だから取り除いて私の中を侵食する不浄なる邪心を
取り除くって、どうや。
私の世界を見たでしょ。あの黒いもやは人が持つ不浄なる邪心が具現化したもの。むき出しの悪意。それを掴んで私の体から引き抜いて。
There was no way. I could never do something so horrifying.
お願い、匠。私でいたいの。私の世界を救って。
Losing her balance, Ayase fell to the ground. Her figure was as frail as could be. But we had made a promise to each other, one she had said herself.
君を守るわ。君も私を守って。
Senna and Kozapi had already been broken, and Rimi was nowhere to be found. I didn't want to lose Ayase too. There was an element of selfishness to it, but most of all, I wanted to help her. I was fully aware it wasn't within my ability to do so. But still, even if Ayase really was some crazy, hopelessly schizo girl, even if all of this was just her delusion, I wanted to help her with all my heart. God, he really is just kind of bouncing back and forth about how he feels about her. But right as I realized that sentiment, the world turned to rust yet again. The snake-shaped black miasma pouring out of Ayase's chest reared its head. Just looking at it made me feel sick. It felt like something was pressing down on my chest, and I couldn't look away. But even if I could, it wouldn't change anything. That's why I knew I had to try and face it head-on. But I couldn't bear it. Felt like my chest was being crushed. My migraine was splitting my head apart. I couldn't do it. I never could have. I didn't have the strength to help anyone.
Takumi.
I looked up in response to Ayase's call. She held her hand out to me. Her tear-filled eyes locked with mine.
来て。私を好きにして。
She showed complete trust in me, or perhaps she was depending on me. I'd never had someone depend on me before. My mind was about to crumble, but Ayase's voice just barely managed to keep it together. I bit my lip, and then I took a single step toward Ayase. With me as its new prey, her black miasma moved toward me and entwined itself around my neck. It was so cold it nearly tricked my mind into thinking it was hot. It eased me into its embrace, but all the while, it was gently strangling me to death. Ayase leaned against me. Her body had gone completely limp. I was forced to support her entire body weight.
Takumi.
I tightly embraced her slender hips.
本当にいいの？
いいわ。
With a gulp, I reached my hand toward the black miasma pouring out of her chest. Following only an ephemeral moment, the miasma changed form into that of a black leech, an act that only served to make it all the more repulsive. That was Ayase's wicked heart, laid bare. The most hideous part of her that she didn't want anyone else to see. That was what the mass was. I took hold of the leech's body. It was extremely slippery and so cold it stung at my palm. I wanted to let go the second I grabbed it, but in a desperate attempt to hold on, I clenched my teeth and endured it. Ayase groaned in pain, her face a horrid mixture of ecstasy and agony.
But...
I tried pulling with all my might, but I could feel her flesh being torn apart. Black liquid burst from her chest, covering my body from head to toe. Whether it was blood or something else, I didn't know. Despite all this, I pressed on, pulling on the leech as hard as I could. Unable to take her screams any longer, I stopped my hands in place, hands atop which Ayase had placed her own.
止めないで。ダメじゃないから。
Even though her body was drenched in sweat, Ayase firmly reassured me. I couldn't hesitate again. If I did, I'd only be torturing her.
抜けろ
Using every ounce of strength I had, I grasped the leech and pulled it out. Ayase's body twitched and writhed. The leech slithered around. It was a lot longer than I thought it would be. The leech curled into a circular mass, then wrapped itself around my arm. It tightened hard against my fist. I guess it was the wicked heart's last stand. I clenched my teeth to endure the pain. I was glad that I'd gotten it off of Ayase at least, but I wasn't sure what to do with it now. Having entrusted her entire body to me, Ayase gently caressed my cheek.
不浄なる邪心は君の手で純粋な邪心へと変わるわ。
The black wicked heart wriggling on my arm suddenly shone violet. A sound burst forth from it. A sound so shrill it was akin to the loudest of screams. There we go. The wicked heart turned into a sword.
これディソード
I'd wanted one so bad, but I'd never been able to get one, no matter how hard I tried. But now it was finally in my grasp. Ayase's wicked heart had transformed into a D-sword.
目覚めたのね。匠。
Even amid her intense pain, Ayase smiled in my arms. Sweat ran down her brow profusely, adhering her bangs to her forehead.
ありがとう。目覚めてくれて。
What had I done to deserve her gratitude? I didn't know. I had no faith in myself.
匠。
Ayase draped her hands around my neck, and then she tightly embraced me.
君だけよ。私の話を真面目に聞いてくれたのは嬉しかった。すごく。
Ayase's body was really warm. The black liquid on her chest was slowly turning red. Her blood stained my clothes. But I didn't care. I held Ayase tightly in acceptance. She still had trouble breathing. I could feel her back tremble with each breath. The smell of her sweat rose in the air. Even that part of her was as lovely as the rest.
大好き。
Has Ayase fallen in love with me? I may or may not depend on her, but I know she depends on me. So I don't think a relationship like this will be too bad. Just the two of us. Is that the end? Is this how it ends? Suddenly, the sky behind Ayase's shoulders caught my attention. It was changing from vermilion to black, but only in a single spot. Or perhaps it was merely an illusion, and in reality, the spot was just a star. Nonetheless, the spot gradually grew bigger. If it continued at such a speed, it would soon blanket the entire sky.
なんだあれ
I mumbled that to myself, completely dumbfounded. Also noticing the unnatural phenomenon, Ayase quickly stood back up, using my shoulders to help herself to do so.
あれが目覚めた邪心をついに侵略を始めたんだわ。結局私は間に合わなかったというの。もう止められないの。そんなことさせない。
Ayase brought forth her D-sword, materializing it from empty space.
どうするつもり
グラジオル記目視録紙幣にはこう書かれているわ。
But interesting that it still is that crimson world that she sees, or maybe that's just the world now. Like, I was thinking that by taking the miasma out of her, she would come back to, like, reality and see the world as it really is.
7本のディソードが集まった時、
Then again, who's to
暗
say
黒の大蛇が
the
現
world
れ
I
る。
see is the actual world too? Maybe it's just the way that I see it.
それは純粋なる邪心の塊。邪心をほふることのできる邪心。あらゆる崩壊を飲み込み、邪心王の身を砕くことのできる。同質にして異質なるもの。 その大蛇を出現させるのよ。グラジオールを倒すために。
Ayase was still trembling, and yet she readied her D-sword all the same and closed her eyes the very next moment. It almost seemed like she was meditating. But even after waiting a moment, nothing happened. Meanwhile, the sky had fully turned black. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought it was night. But no, the sun hadn't set. It was the black miasmata, amalgamated into a mist that was spreading across Shibuya. Transforming into a wave, it sought to drown the city in wicked hearts. It slowly crept over the rubble-filled earth, painting every inch it touched black. Silently, it eroded. It swept over our feet. A croak of despair came from my mouth. The corroded world was now rotting away. It decomposed, crumbled, and then it all returned to nothing. People, corpses, and debris alike. Everything slowly melted together, and from the amalgam came an overpowering rotten stench.
綾瀬、どうにかならないの？
どうして？
Ayase wasn't responding to me. She simply stared at the D-sword she held in her hand, her eyes on the verge of tears.
ディソードが7本揃っているのに、どうして現れないの？このままじゃグラジオールに世界は飲み込まれてしまうわ。やっぱり黒騎士が7人集まらなければ
Oh
ど
no.
うしようもなかった。
Oh wait, because I didn't get the because does she have to take it from me? Does she have to absorb it into her sword? Is she gonna kill me right now for my D-sword?
予言通りに進めなければダメだったのよ。
The black wave was growing even faster than before. It had only been up to my ankles a few seconds ago, but now it was already up to my knees. Strangely enough, I felt some resistance to the flow of it. Did it actually have physical substance? Was it really not just a simple illusion? Filled with horror, a shiver ran down my spine. Shibuya was actually going to rot away.
綾瀬が妄想すればいい。グラジオールを倒す妄想を。
Unable to hold it in any longer, I screamed at her, but Ayase just shook her head.
私の妄想じゃないわ。グラジオール機は。
だとしても、僕にも綾瀬にもその予言をねじ曲げて新しい妄想を現実にすることは可能なはずだろ。それがギガロマニアックス、いや黒騎士なんだろ。
でも、匠、
Ayase stared my way, her gaze pleading with me.
わからないの。どうすればいいのか。
Oh God. I was at a loss for words. The world was covered by the black miasma. The sky was pitch black, blocking out any and all light. Not even a single star remained. The black wave was already up to my hips. It felt like I was going to be washed away by its current any second now. It took everything I had to stay standing. The corpse beside me melted into the liquid and was then swept away by the churning waters. If I let it swallow me up, that was exactly what would happen to me too. The mere thought terrified me so much, I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. What do I do? What the hell do I do? I desperately tried to think of a solution, but I couldn't come up with any. I was no hero. I was just an otaku freak. And even though I'd finally gotten a D-sword, I had no idea how to use it, so that had ended up being just as useless as me. Everyone would be better off if I just died. I should just get impaled by a bunch of stakes and bleed out, like in the crucifixion case. Or maybe you'll get, impaled by a D-sword. But right when I thought that, I suddenly remembered something. The songs Fess had written. Their lyrics.
歌を歌うんだ。
Despite how it might have sounded, it wasn't something I'd come up with as a last resort. No, I was convinced it was the best and also only solution I could have ever come up with.
歌で綾瀬の妄想を世界に拡散させるんだ。
And the world she spun with them captivated the youth of Shibuya. The Gladiol saga was a legend of dubious authenticity that might or might not have been true. It could have all just been Ayase's delusion, and she was the only one who had any knowledge of it. But that didn't matter. The legend had been spread to the youth of Shibuya through phantasm songs. Therefore, mutual recognition had already been achieved.
だから歌うんだ。グラジオールを倒す歌を歌ってよ、フェス。
歌えというの。 この状況で。
歌を歌うことで導きが現れるって前に言ってたじゃないか。
そうね、言ったわ。そしてあのライブで匠と出会えた。匠、
Ayase extended her hand to me. I took her hand in my own and squeezed it tightly.
匠は好き？
Okay, bad time to be asking this right now.
うん。
I'd listened to the album I'd bought from the concert many times. I'd left the concert early due to my fear of crowds, but she made me want to try again and again and again, however many times it would take. Seeing me nod along, Ayase smiled blissfully.
ここで滅びても別にいいかもしれない。匠がそう言ってくれたから。歌うわ。聞いていて、匠。
Ayase closed her eyes, took a few moments to focus before finally letting out a deep breath. Then she opened her eyes. She was no longer Ayase anymore. He was Fess from Phantasm.
最下に契約の地を。
She quietly murmured the song's name, and then she burst into song. Her voice reverberated toward the pitch-black sky.
悔いをって悔いをって闇夜を切り裂き月光を浴びて幾千もの鉄鎚は汝の痛みとなりて今解き放たれる。やがて叫びは宙に舞い夜空は赤く染まるだろう。十字の杭は力となりやがて聖域へとたどり着く。
The lyrics were a hint.
綾瀬、杭を打つんだ。
The song wasn't prophesizing the crucifixion case at all.
7本のディソードを合わせて闇夜に打ち込むんだ。
There was no doubt in my mind. It was a song meant to overthrow Gladiol, a song to release Ayase from her world corroded by rust and red.
綾瀬の世界を壊せ。
Ayase stared at me, her eyes burned with a fiery passion. Ayase looked her most beautiful when she was singing. Her energy had completely changed. The damsel in distress from before was nowhere to be seen. Ayase understood what I was trying to say, and without saying a word, she nodded. I poured all my strength into our joined hands, and while desperately fighting against the power of the Black Wave, I entrusted my D-sword to Ayase. The moment she grabbed it, it was engulfed in red light and swiftly disappeared. But it hadn't been destroyed. As if it had been guided there, the red light was taken in by Ayase's D-sword. Once I knew that for sure, I let go of Ayase's hand. Ayase unleashed her power as a black knight. An enormous burst of wind came forth, blasting the world with enough force to make everything around her tremble. The black wave was struck by the pressure, turning into a whirlpool. There wasn't a fragment of her usual indifference in her anymore. Ayase took a stance. She spread her legs, lowered her hips, and held her sword high. Her whole body was overflowing with not just strain, but a strong will. The will to look toward the future. She was just barely able to hold back her urge for pure destruction. She had to wait for the perfect opportunity to unleash it all. The red flicker of the sword grew faster. That sword is that which bends fate to its will. That sword is that which converges all sorrows. That sword is that which interferes with the transcendental place. Transcendental place? Fueled by wicked hearts designed to rend others, its edge was double. It was the manifestation of all the cries for salvation that arose from Ayase's soul, an embodiment of Ayase's chaotic heart. Ayase's gaze was focused on a single point, the black heavens, the ones that shrouded my blue sky, the ones that shrouded Ayase's red sky. A sky born from all the impurity dwelling within wicked hearts, one that had brought nothing but darkness to the world. The only thing I could do was pray. Would the Black Knights triumph, or would Gladiol prevail? Our fate was resting on Ayase's shoulders. And yet, for some inexplicable reason, I knew, just as foretold in the legend Ayase had orchestrated, we would never lose to the wicked-hearted king. So, Ayase, strike it, and pierce through the world itself.
開け天国の扉
Her entire body curved like a bow being drawn, and then, with all the strength vested in her, she cast her shot forth. The sword carved a trail of light. Oh, okay. And just like that, blue. I don't know if I skipped, like the big explosion. All right. When I came to, the brilliant light had returned to the world. The sky was blue, the color that couldn't be put into words. And yet I knew the sky I was looking at right now was most definitely blue. Gladiol must have been overthrown, or at the very least, the black miasma plaguing the world had disappeared. And now a warm, soft hand tightly clasped my own. Ayase was standing by my side, looking up to the exact same sky I was. Without saying a word, tears poured from her eyes.
青はあんなに美しい色をしていたのね。
見えるの
So yeah, it's all talking about the blue sky, like Rimi, when there was like that, moment of her floating in the blue sky. It seems like we're all aiming for that blue sky, the true ending.
見えるわ。匠が見ているのと同じ色の空が。
And what a clear color it was. So clear I could feel it in my chest. So clear it almost hurt to look at. Who knew the sky above was so clear? Before now, I had never once realized, what if they're dead? This is heaven. This is like a perfect world. Shibuya was in shambles, transformed into a city of death. Not even a glimmer of its former glory was left in it. And yet, Ayase, appearing more dazzling than ever, looked fondly over it all.
世界はこんなにも美しいのね。
And with those words, Ayase gently clasped my hand. There we go. Well, I mean, other than everyone just around us like dying and stuff, that probably seemed to be one of the better endings, I guess, at least from that character's point of view. I'm trying to think of, the other endings I got with Nanami, where I was just in basically a dream world where I was in love with my sister, which and then Yua. I guess that could have, like she's trying to heal from what happened. So it's sort of a hopeful ending, once again surrounded by death. This one seemed the most hopeful, though, of the alternative endings, I suppose, that I've gotten so far. I don't know how I felt about that. Like the last little bit was pretty cool, but I was kind of like Takumi. I was getting a little bit tired of Ayase talking about the wicked hearts, the black knights, Gladiol over and over again. But that was a pretty heart-wrenching revelation that she, ever since she was born, she's seen the world as like a twisted, evil place, and seeing the worst of people. I assumed that she was just twisted by her torture, but no, apparently it's been like that ever since she was little. So I can see why she is the way that she is, to finally get to see the world as a hopeful place despite all the death. I'm like, okay, all right, that was a pretty good ending, actually. So yeah, that is going to do it for this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And let's see, which one are we going to be doing next? All right, so next we are going to do Kozue's. So then after that, we've got Senna's, we've got Rimi's, and then we've got the Truette. So we are zipping our way towards the end. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to Kozue's ending next episode. Not sure how long that one's going to be. Could be like this one. Could be able to do it in one episode. Might be a two-parter like you is. Not too sure. But look forward to that next week. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Until then. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Revealing Storm, Lynn's VA, Kenju Storm, Icognito, and Bad Cat.